Okay, it's now recording. Great. I'll wait for 9 a.m. and then we introduce ourselves. Or 8 p.m. for people in EST time.
You're going to edit this boring part out at the beginning to put it up on the internet.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Right, now you should be in the spotlight right now, so everyone can see your face. Nice. All right, but don't worry, this is gonna be great. So let me see. Should I unspotlight you for a while I introduce myself? Okay. Spotlight. Let's see. Okay. Great. Now it is time to start. Hi everyone. Thank you guys for being right on time, which is great. So my name is Sarah. I'm the workshop coordinator for Q-munity, a student organization aiming to educate anyone on quantum computing. So this is Ben. He's our workshop coordinator. He's our keynote speaker for this workshop today. And the way this workshop is going to be structured is that Ben is going to start off with his presentation, and once it's over, we're going to have a nice Q&A session. And depending on what Ben is going to be presenting, we may start posing some questions for you guys to discuss if you guys are willing to, if you guys would like as well. So Ben, how about you introduce yourself for a while before we get started on the presentation?
Sure. So my name is Ben Criger. I did a PhD finishing in 2014 at the University of Waterloo in Canada in quantum computing. And then I did a couple postdocs in Germany and the Netherlands before getting a real big boy job over here in Singapore at Horizon Quantum Computing. And of course, you should go to the website horizonquantum.com, see everything that we're doing. And I'm also affiliated with IGDOR, which is a sort of loose collaboration of semi-independent researchers globally who are interested in publishing, a lot of open research and teaching and learning both online. And they also have a co-working space in Bali, but I haven't been to the co-working space in Bali, so I can't tell you what that's like. And today, I'm going to talk to you about how to get your start in quantum computing. I'm not going to talk to you about how to have an illustrious career at the very highest heights of quantum computing, or how to understand everything about quantum computing, because I don't know how to do either of those things. But I do have a start, so I'll talk to you about how to get a start. Right, so what this talk is about is where I tell you how to think, I tell you what to read, I tell you where to go for help, I tell you a lot of other things, right? And I give you a sort of a path to getting your start in quantum computing. But one thing to know is that you can't take what I say for granted. Quantum computing is new and it's a field of research, so we're learning new things all the time. Things are constantly being written that may or may not be important to read. The people you go to for help will necessarily change as you change topics, and there's a lot of stuff that I don't know and will never know about quantum computing. So primarily, um, if you want to get into this field, it's going to be um, better for everybody involved if you're in the driver's seat, right? And um, if you take, let's see, as your primary goal, um, right, obtaining command over your own research projects, your own trajectory. I'm going to talk about hype in a minute. As soon as somebody stops underlining the stuff on the slides. Okay, it's a little playing pranks on the coach here. What I'm not going to do as I talk about hype is to focus on any individual, research group, professor, corporation, or what have you. And there's a couple reasons for this. One is that, if you make enemies, you can find things get difficult for you. And that's true, regardless of what walk of life you're in, but also it's because individuals are not to blame. The, um, the problem of hype in, well, okay, we could say quantum computing, but more broadly in the tech sector is not caused by individuals, who just wake up in the morning one day, I think I'll promote a bunch of weird hype about what I do. It's because there's an incentive. And no matter who it is, right, if they choose to follow the incentive or not, if not, they'll be replaced with someone who is, right? When there's a lane to be driven, someone's going to drive it. And focusing on that person and their decision, right, is sort of counterproductive. Well, okay, it's like, hating the player instead of the game, etc., which is cliche, but it's also true. Okay, so let's talk about hype. Uh, one of the problems in tech is that there are two types of hype. There's the technical kind and the commercial kind. And the technical kind is recognized easily by scientists, engineers, and other technical people. And the commercial kind is almost a blind spot. I mean, we recognize it, but it sort of plays second fiddle. And we'll always focus on whether something is technically viable or not, because that's what we train for decades to do. That's our natural inclination. And most of the time, that's what they pay us the big bucks for. So what am I calling technical hype here? It's what you could call pseudoscience. So on the left, we see an example. This is Pons and Fleischmann and their device, which they were pressured into saying produced nuclear fusion, in a sort of very comfortable room temperature lab setting, right? And would serve as a way to generate cheap, clean electricity for thousands of years to come. Of course, it didn't work. And they had to retract everything. It was all very embarrassing. And on the right, we have we have one model of a perpetual motion machine. So can you guys see my mouse over here? You got to nod your heads because you're on mute. So you can see it? Okay. The way this is supposed to work is that, these balls, as they fall out over the top of this machine, they exert more torque on on this wheel, and so the thing constantly keeps itself in motion. And this guy's confused, right, because it's constantly keeping itself in motion, which you can't see because it's a picture. Although if you do the math correctly, you'll see that the whole thing remains in balance at all times, and there's no opportunity there for continual or perpetual motion, right? These things are unjustified based on calculations, experiments, and technical criteria, right? You can say whether they work outside of any social or economic context, right? They are strictly laboratory phenomena. And so a technical person, right, would find their natural inclination to understand things in terms of intrinsic details, right, would work for describing devices like these, right? When you're given a device, you want to take it apart, look at the components inside it, understand them all, form a picture of the whole, and then make a judgment. Whereas there's also this thing called the hype cycle that comes from this company, Gartner. I don't know, maybe you've seen this before, but this is like a cartoon image of how much enthusiasm or expectation there is versus time for a new technology, and that's new to the market rather than being new, in the lab. Um, so let's see, for a notional technology, first there's some R&D, then you get startups, then there's a first generation of products, right? You reach a peak when people who are not, you know, uh, predisposed to enjoy the product finally get exposed to it, and then they get disillusioned, and you end up, with very low expectations for a while. But that lack of attention permits people to resume research and development, so they change the product a little bit instead of having to write ads that say the product as it exists is good. And then eventually you get to some kind of adoption and widespread use for a given technology. And not all technologies follow this, right? This is just a sort of average image of one company's um, version of the events that they've seen play out multiple times. And it's worth noting that physicists live here, right? I live here. This is me, where I work. And what we hope to do is go from here smoothly out to here. And maybe we can defy this blue line, maybe not. It depends on how well we sort of manage social expectations and how well we can function economically, right? And these questions are completely independent from whether quantum computing is technically possible or not, which, okay, I happen to think that it is. All right, now, you're going to read some stuff in the media about quantum computing. How do you know whether you should be reading it or whether you should take it seriously? I've compiled a brief list of red flags for you to take a look at. One is cliches, right? So if they're talking about how Moore's law is no longer valid, I mean, that's true, but come on, buddy, we know. It's been 10 years and CPUs haven't gotten a lot faster. For this, you can go listen to the great Sophie Wilson and her talk on the future of microprocessors. She was one of the original engineers working on ARM, the sort of alternative architecture that became really popular in smartphones and mobile devices because it's low power. And she has, decades of experience in semiconductor engineering or computer architecture. So, she can tell you a lot better than me about the limits to Moore's law. And that's probably the one person you need to listen to on that. Some journalist talking to you about it, not telling you anything you don't know at that point. A lot of people still say that a quantum computer can just go do two things at once. This is a technical point, and it's sort of not true. And I figure I'll belabor this a little bit, just because I can. In a quantum computer, you can have a number that it is sort of in two states at once. The technically correct thing to say is that it's in a superposition of those two states. You can also have more than two. You can have many degrees of freedom and be in a superposition over all of them. But if you do a measurement, right, and you can only learn the result of a computation if you do a measurement, you necessarily get one value. And it's going to be randomly selected based on how large the terms in the superposition are. So the idea that a quantum computer can do multiple tasks at once is true right up until the point that you want an actual answer to the question you asked. And then it only did one thing. So the trick, and it's a very difficult trick, is to engineer a situation where you're going to sort of ask multiple questions, and then the algorithm will change the superposition vector so that the terms with the correct answers or the answers that you want to obtain in them are very large and the other terms are very small. And that's a very general thing to say, but it's easier said than done. So a quantum computer can do two things at once as long as you have an asterisk over here that is larger than the text itself, because there's a pretty big catch. And then if you see sort of weasel words or phrases, that's like, oh, quantum computing is the next big thing. You don't know if another thing is going to come along before that in computing or technology or in some other area that could be more exciting. Or it's, oh, it's just around the corner. Nah, it'll be here when it gets here, and calm down. Um, right, and if the article you're reading doesn't have any kind of discussion of the details of a quantum computer, so no comparison between the advance that they're discussing and what came before. They don't have any historical perspective about the basic attributes of a quantum computer, and they don't have any figures of merit with units of measurement if possible, right? Then you can probably avoid reading such an article. Oh yeah, and the big one is a fixed time frame. So if they say, in 3 years, a quantum computer is going to do X, Y, Z. Well, okay, you might have a crystal ball, Mr. or Miss Journalist, but in science we don't say things like that because the future tends to be very hard to predict. Right? So you can stop reading articles like those now. And if you see that, that should be the red flag. Then maybe you skim through the rest of it, but it's not really important. Right. So for example, here's a good one. If you see that an IT consulting firm has named quantum computing one of its top 5 key technologies, right? There should be multiple red flags here. IT consulting firm, yeah? People who don't know. A top 5, according to what criterion? Key technology, for what purpose? Right? The title raises more questions than it answers, none of which are about the actual advances being made in quantum computing. Quantum computers could solve climate change. This is oddly similar to a headline you might see, although this has been sanitized to protect the innocent. Quantum computers tend not to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, so it's hard to see how they're going to solve climate change. Right? Plant some trees, grow a little algae in a bucket, leave coal in the ground. Though that's how you're going to solve climate change. Right? This is proposing an extremely technically advanced future solution to a problem that that requires no additional technical information in order to solve. So, right, you can ignore headlines like this. Oh yeah, and if someone says the revolution is coming in 2 years, not in quantum computing. Advances will be made in the next 2 years, but I promise you, if you go into the lab and see what's actually happening, you're going to get bored. Right? It's not going to be, like putting the gas down on the car in the DeLorean and blazing trails of fire into the future. There's another sort of cousin of hype, which is quantum computing hate, and it's nice that there's some hate. You got to have balance, and people do challenge quantum computing on technical grounds, but most of what's said about it is wrong. So I'm going to single out an article here. It's pretty safe if I talk about this guy because he's not very influential in the field. And this is being recorded. You can tell him I said it. Sorry, Mikhail. But okay, so this guy published in IEEE Spectrum, the case against quantum computing, and he said, that we're going to manipulate numbers with really high precision, and there's going to be a lot of them. Of course, well, okay, this was not true, and we don't need to get into it because somebody, thankfully, some hero, wrote an article that was the case against quantum computing. This was a couple years ago now, maybe a year and a half, but it lays out how we only use discrete numbers, and that the issues of precision are fundamentally similar to those that we face with conventional computers, right? So the computer that I'm using to talk to you right now has the same problem of how to represent precise numbers, right? So if I want to say, what position is something at in space, before I calculate where it goes on a discrete grid of pixels, suppose I want to map 3D space down to 2D space, right? Then I really want to use continuous degrees of freedom. I want to do any rotation, right? But if I say really I want to do any rotation, the angles that I use in that rotation have to be infinitely long. And I don't have an infinite memory in my computer. It's not infinitely large. So what I do is I'll cut off at a certain number of digits, basically. There's something called a floating point representation, where you can use a variable number of digits on the left and right sides of the decimal point. And it's slightly better, but slightly more complex. And this is all explained using nice animated GIFs in my article. So go read my article. Go read Mikhail's article as well, just to get a flavor for the level of discussion that's going on in quantum computing. Okay, so I've told you what not to read, how to criticize the stuff, but what should you read? It's, of course, actual papers. And you can go get a surprising number of these papers. They're put up before they're published in journals that you would have to pay for. They go up every day on a site called archive.org. And there are little sub-branches of the site called CondMat, which is short for condensed matter. That's stuff that's not a fluid or a gas is condensed matter. And lots of the quantum computing stuff goes up on CondMat because many of us hope to make a quantum computer out of condensed matter. Some people hope to make it out of a fluid or out of atoms that sort of hover in space, that are buffeted by electromagnetic fields so that they stay put, right? Oh, some of them use ions as well. I don't want to leave the ion people out. And there are many other architectures, but a lot of them are based in condensed matter. There's, of course, quant-ph for quantum physics, right? And quantum computing implementations all use quantum physics. There's atom-ph for the atomic people and the ion people as well. There's also a nice open journal that functions as an overlay for the archive. So if you want to get what a select group of editors think are the top hits, the choice cuts of the archive, then you can go to quantumjournal.org, and it's focused on quantum computing, quantum information theory as well. All right. These papers are extremely difficult to read. You got to be an expert, right? And that gets us into how are you going to get to become an expert? You got to have the right mindset. And okay, maybe this advice is not going to surprise you. I mean, you did sign up to take career advice from a guy wearing a t-shirt sitting on his bed. So you get what you pay for. But you're going to want to take calculus, a couple years of it in undergrad. You know, you might be able to find free course materials for this, but that's extremely difficult. MIT OpenCourseWare is out there. I don't know anybody who got in, just sitting in their room on MIT courseware. You would have to be an extreme Stakhanovite, disciplined in order to get up to a level of expertise where you can start in quantum computing. I'm sure some people have done it, and these people have my admiration, but it's not for everybody. But yeah, take second year calculus, take second year linear algebra, take third year quantum mechanics. Third year quantum mechanics is usually the first course they teach you, so you don't have to take 3 courses in quantum mechanics. You would take one, but the calculus and the linear algebra you need in order to understand quantum mechanics, to the extent that anybody understands quantum mechanics. And once you've got this, you're at the bare minimum that you need in order to understand what's going on in this book. This is Quantum Computation and Quantum Information by Nielsen and Chuang. And it is more or less the comprehensive text that you will need to read in order to get up to the level of like a first-year master's student, where you can begin doing research and getting paid. You get paid a little. You get paid for it, though, in a graduate school somewhere. Read this book, and read this book. Do all of the exercises in it, or at least try to do all of the exercises in it. I probably could not do a randomly selected exercise in this book at the moment, but everybody should try it at least once. And at a minimum, you will notice that there are some chapters that you like more than others, and that will help you to decide what field you want to work in within quantum computing. Get this book. Okay. And the rest of this talk devolves into a bunch of random advice. So, for example, about quitting. A lot of people, will tell you, stay out of your comfort zone, and never quit. You have to persevere. You have to work hard. Ugh, no thanks. There's plenty of times that I quit, and I'm still here. I got an okay job, doing all right. And a lot of times people tell you to persevere is because it's to their benefit that you persevere, right? Work overnight, crank out results regardless of whether you understand what you're doing. Of course, no one that I've ever worked with has done this, but I've seen it happen in departments. And there's a paradox here, which is that, every supervisor wants to have really valuable supervisees who are competent technically and can execute on a lot of stuff. And in order to become that person, you will have to achieve a level of understanding. And in order to achieve that level of understanding, you will have to spend a lot of time not blindly executing and producing results. So yeah, and unfortunately, the onus will be on you. This is not the way it should be, but this is the way it is, to balance between getting yourself educated and um, making the papers that you need to impress the future person that you're going to work for. Not to put it too bluntly. And it's inflating, frankly. We used to say back when I was in grad school, come on, it was 10 years ago. 3 papers and you could get your PhD. Make them nice and varied. Learn a lot with each paper. Nowadays, people have discussions about how many papers should you get? Is 5 enough? Should you go for 7? Come on, relax. And you look at 2 of these papers, and it's like virtually identical. Learn between publications. Go for 3 in 3 different nice subfields. Right? I think you'd be better off in the long run when you do it. I got out with like 1 and a couple of reviews. So, believe in yourself, anything is possible, kids. If you don't know what you're doing, stop. It's not to say quit, but take some time off to find out what you're doing and why. Right. And if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, how it's going to be used to do quantum computing, or what field you're working in, what you're helping people to understand or to do, you also have to stop. Ask somebody. Ask your supervisor. Ask the people you work with. Ask the other people who are in this talk right now, right? Exchange email addresses with each other and work together to step your game up in quantum computing if you want to pursue it further. Right? Get help all the time. Engage in discussion constantly. This one might be too spicy. I'm going to regret this on the recording, but force your supervisor to explain why the project they've given you is important. And you can force the supervisor to do this because if they gave it to you, that means they're not going to do it themselves, right? So if you drag your feet a little bit, if you have a seat and lean back on the project and say, I'm really being held back by the fact that I don't understand what I'm doing and why, then they'll explain it to you so that you'll get back to work. It helps if you have a grad student union, if you're in grad school and you're doing this. Just FYI. Advice does not apply in Singapore. There's no unions. Ask questions. Yes. This is the one, undergraduates, graduate students, even people, in their 30s will say, I'm afraid to look stupid. I personally am no longer afraid to look stupid. Everybody knows that I'm stupid. Everyone operating at the frontier of knowledge is stupid. If we knew what we were doing, it would be engineering, where you build a bridge out of enough steel and enough bolts, and it works 1,000 times out of 1,000. Nobody asks any questions anymore. You do the math correct, you sign off on it, you stamp it, they build it, they get it done, right? Simple, boring, old hat, because it has to be. It has to work every time. If you are doing experiments and doing theoretical physics, you're going to learn new things, which means that before you learned the new thing, you had a misconception, right? You were doing something dumb. You're pushing your knowledge to its limits. So you're going to look dumb. You're going to face plant. Everybody does it. Do it 100 times. Just do it. If you get lost, okay. Here's one thing: is that there's a sentence you can interpret 2 ways. You should understand what's going on, right? And if I said this to you, you might think, oh, if I don't understand what's going on, I should be ashamed. No. If you don't understand what's going on, you should ask a question. Stop the speaker right when you get lost and ask them to clarify what's going on. They have to do it. Otherwise, they reveal their own lack of understanding, and now you're in control. So how do you like that, right? It's sort of like a hostage situation. Also, there is no feeling better than having been grilled yourself at one point and then paying it forward, right? If you get to be a postdoc, you get your PhD, take the time out to really torture a graduate student or an undergrad who doesn't know what they're talking about. Put them through the ringer. Cry in the dojo, laugh on the battlefield. When they have to get interviewed for their grant requests, in 20 years, and the grant people from the government are asking them these apparently softball questions, it'll be because they took a real beating from you. So you can email them, say you're welcome. Right. And you don't have to understand the entire talk. Just learn as much as possible at all times. Okay, so now you're not going to take my advice. You're still in your feelings about asking questions. Ask the speaker after the talk. You don't have to look stupid in front of the entire audience. Only one person has to know that you're stupid. If that's too many people, right, or you don't want to look stupid in front of somebody you don't know, just ask your friends. Did you understand what that person was talking about in that talk? Do you get this? Is this legitimate? Right? Have a little discussion about it and learn something. And if you're still too intimidated to ask one of your good friends who you know very well and who already knows that you're an idiot, and you know that they're an idiot, then just ask yourself the questions. Write them down in a book. It will help you listen. It will help you learn, right? It will keep you engaged with the talk and dissecting scientific topics as they come up. Okay. How to compete in science. And we're almost done with this talk. How long has it been? Okay, it's been about a half hour. I've gone a bit over time from what I intended, but we'll be okay. This is not the 100-meter dash. You don't line up at the start of a scientific project, with the Delft people, the Yale people, the Berkeley people, and then all race to the same finish line. This is a lot more like prospecting for gold. You look in one place using one technique, the other people look in another place using another technique. Time and chance, right? Is that Philippians? I don't know a lot about the Christian Bible, saying a lot about me, but they have they got the verse that says time and chance, the race does not go to the swift nor the battle to the strong, but time and chance play in all things, right? You're going to get lucky. Some other people are going to get lucky. Deal with it. The best way to win a scientific competition, at least in my opinion, and I haven't done this too often, is not to try and get something done faster than another person that they're already doing. It's difficult, and the thing was already going to get done anyway, so the audience doesn't benefit, the broader community doesn't benefit when you do this. Come up with something that, the thing you want to maximize is the factor. When people see your work, they should say, how come I didn't think of that? It's so obvious in retrospect. It's so obviously beneficial. It fixes a gap that nobody talked about, but now that we can see it, we all knew it was there. And that's how you compete in science, at least according to me. It helps to be contrarian, right? To look for things that nobody else is looking for. Because then, no one's going to beat you to it as well. You can take the time to do it correctly. Okay. Real miscellaneous tips and tricks. This is stuff that I missed in my undergrad and graduate education, which, a decade ago, probably they do teach courses on this kind of stuff now. But a lot of people will still pay these topics, I think, less respect than they deserve. But they'll kind of treat it as something you can sort of learn as you go, but it does pay big dividends to take your time with them and really master them. LaTeX and Beamer. This is the stuff that I'm using to make this talk and give it to you right now. This is a nice PDF. It works cross-platform. You'll notice I haven't had any issues where it's like, oh, the video won't play. Oh, my slides aren't showing up correctly. Where's the font? One is because it's all on my computer and I control it. But also it's because I have a nice PDF for portable document format. And I managed to program that in a little markup language called LaTeX. This is what people use as well to produce every single scientific paper, unless you're submitting to Science, in which case they make you use Microsoft Word, which in my opinion is like devil worship. Don't do that. Learn how to use LaTeX. Google it. And take a course or look at the overleaf notes. Those ones are really good. Mathematica. A lot of that second-year calculus that you have to learn will wind up being done for you by a computer program called Mathematica. A lot of people treat it like it's Mathemagica, where you just put questions in. A computer is especially intelligent, and then it answers the question perfectly. But it is actually a programming language. It does work in a certain way. It is quite interesting, and if you understand it, you'll be able to get a lot more out of it than people who just sort of do the most expedient thing with it. Go to mathprogrammingintro.org. There's a gigantic free textbook that you can pour through. And again, if you're competing with other people in science, don't try and be better than them at the thing they're good at, right? That's hard. Try and be marginally good at the thing everyone else is bad at. You could get paid a lot to do a little, as long as nobody else knows how to do it at all. Learn MATLAB, Python, and Julia. MATLAB is still pretty popular, although it's declining. But a lot of plotting libraries and mathematics libraries are sort of based on MATLAB, so if you know it, the skill can transfer. And Python and Julia are really eating MATLAB's lunch when it comes to programming languages. And again, there are people who use programming languages all day, every day for their jobs. They are topics that deserve respect in their own right, and not just as an expedient tool to be picked up, get the job done, save the code, publish, and then ignore it forever. Oh, and writing. My advice to every graduate student when they start is to read George Orwell's Politics and the English Language. Right? This is going to help you write clearly and to write for past you. Right? So at the beginning of a project, you don't understand anything. At the end of the project, you're supposed to understand. And then when you write, you explain it so that you could pick it up quickly if you had to do it again, having forgotten everything. And that's why it helps as well to know how your research fits in a larger context and to know what you're doing, and to make your supervisor tell you, if they can. Right. Here are some old white guys you can go listen to, which, yeah, a little unfortunate that they're all old white guys, but they're only white because they're old. It was the past, and it's the only people they would give hot jobs to in the 60s. But these two guys really are sharp. There's Alan Kay, who was part of the invention at Xerox PARC of like the internet, modern printing, tablets and so forth, laptops, etc. And in terms of how to do research into engineering specifically, he really does have a lot of great ideas. And there's Richard Hamming, who, well, okay, has passed away now, but you can go look him up on YouTube. He gave a series of talks about how to have a good career in research, and he knows better than me. His name is on a lot better stuff than mine is. And okay, I don't agree with these guys 100%. There's a lot of stuff in there. So Alan Kay talks about some people being a certain kind of learner and another kind of people being another kind of learner. I don't believe in it. I think there are types of learning that anybody can do. And Hamming talks a lot about hard work, which, okay, you can't not work at all and then hope to have a career in research. But really, the importance is to spend your time coming to an understanding of the topic and not just to grind away doing a bunch of math, right? If you're spending your time doing stuff you already know how to do 12 hours a day, you're not pushing the boundaries of knowledge, right? You might be out of your comfort zone, but the trick really is to expand your comfort zone, right? When you see somebody win a competition, the people who are most impressive, right? Or you see somebody explain something, the people at the top are not out of their comfort zone. Their comfort zone is bigger than yours, and that's the trick. Right, that's what I got to say on that. Okay, and here's a couple books for you to go read. There's The Entrepreneurial State by Mariana Mazzucato, and this ought to disabuse you of the notion, well, a lot of these are about how research gets done, more than they are about any technical topic. And this is, to disabuse you of the notion that companies are out here doing everything, and the government is sort of a weird elderly institution that's filled with old people in old suits. And it sort of sets the record straight when it comes to engineering and technology. Not so much quantum computing specifically, but broadly. And then there's the Idea Factory, which is all about, the absolute peak of innovative institutions, which was Bell Labs, where they invented the transistor, they invented the laser, they invented a lot of stuff having to do with computing, they invented the communication satellite, right? And a lot of really hot stuff came out of Bell Labs. So go read these books if you want to understand more about how research gets done. That is the end of the talk. I don't have a blank slide to leave you with because I really do want you to read these books. But now I would like to take questions.
Okay, guys, anyone can feel free to unmute themselves and ask questions. Don't be afraid. So I guess I can start first with one question I do have. I think I wrote it down over here. So, oh, okay, we can't unmute themselves. Okay, that was my fault. I am so sorry. Now let me. All right, are you guys able to unmute yourselves now?
Yeah, I am actually.
Okay.
By the way, it's all right. It happens all the time with me when I'm making meetings. One thing that I wanted to ask is like, is this going to be recorded and like, are you guys going to send it out? Because like, I missed like a few things that I wanted to like, jot down.
Oh yeah, for sure. This whole presentation will be recorded and uploaded onto Q-munity's
Okay.
for you to watch.
Thank you.
I see what the problem is. Everything I said was too clear and obviously correct, and that's why there are no questions. Either that or people are still afraid of looking like idiots.
I highly doubt that.
Idiot on idiot conversation. Don't worry.
Okay, I've got a question in the chat. So
Okay.
Andrew asked if you have specific recommendations for calculus, linear algebra, and quantum mechanics texts and resources for self-learning.
Oh, let's see. Well, for calculus, a lot of the texts are more or less the same. I have a recommendation for what you should do with those texts. Well, of course, I used Stewart, which is the one that usually has the violin on the cover, and it's the size of a phone book. Do the exercises. Calculus is not something you read in a book; it's something you write. So whenever they have the gigantic list of nearly identical practice problems at the end of the chapter, and it's super boring, do them. They are there for a reason. I sound like your dad right now, but it really is a good idea to write more calculus than it is to just read it. There is one way that you're allowed to cheat, which is okay. If you can Google around or look at, I think Computer File has a video on this on YouTube. You can represent mathematical expressions as trees in a computer. Trees are a certain type of graph, by which I mean a network. And if you can figure out how to do that, you can program a computer from scratch to do a lot of the calculus for you. And I would say, if you can program a computer to do your homework, then you don't have to do it yourself. And that's a great way to learn programming. It gives you a motive to make sure that it works. And if you're going to self-learn, the huge problem this is like the Herculean task, if you do it, you're a demigod. You have to mark your own homework. You have to figure out how to figure out if you were wrong. And, if you can do that, then you're a true researcher. But the reason people take courses and have other people help them learn is because this is really titanically difficult. But yeah, Stewart for calculus. I think I used Richardson for linear algebra. And let's see, quantum mechanics, you can go for Griffiths, and that's like the easy mode. And then for fourth year, you would use Jackson. There's another Intro to Quantum Computing textbook by Kay, Laflamme, and Mosca, which I am obligated to mention because I did my PhD at Waterloo with Laflamme, and Mosca was there as well. Also, it's a very good book, and it's more introductory than Nielsen and Chuang. So if you want to get a brief overview, like if you're tight on time, then you can get most of the important topics that are in Nielsen and Chuang right there in the much smaller book. And we used that one in my undergrad course in quantum computing, and it was pretty good. It would have had to be because it convinced me to go to grad school at Waterloo. Ba-da-ba-ba. Yeah, that's about it for text recommendations.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, great. Thank you for the question. So we have one question in the chat, and then we'll get to the two who raised their hands and who raised their hands. So question number one from the chat is, looking back, is there anything you changed in getting to where you are?
Spicy. This is being recorded. Did you know? Who is this? Who asked me this question? That's why they're in the chat. They want to stay anonymous.
Well, not sure if I want to reveal that information. If you guys,
I'm sure you don't. Fight me IRL. No, okay. Is there anything I would change? Yes. I definitely would have taken abstract algebra in undergrad. It was a third-year math course, and they cover groups, rings, fields, and a lot of advanced mathematical objects, which make it real convenient to handle quantum operations. Let's see, there's a book called Naive Lie Theory, which I've never read, but looks nice. I read like the first chapter, you know, because I have a job now. I have to produce results. I don't have time to just sit and absorb textbooks. I think it's by a guy named Stilwell. Don't quote me on that. It's called Naive Lie Theory. Oh, Lie is spelled L-I-E, like lie theory. But the groups are real. They're not lies. And let's see. So, yeah, the objects covered in that book are sort of the pinnacle of calculus and linear algebra, because they're matrices, but you can also take derivatives of them. And of course, if you are a real Lie group theorist, you would say that they form a group, but they're also a smooth manifold, which nobody understands. Yeah? So I've lost you all at that point. But they're matrices that you do calculus with. You can think of it that way. And a lot of objects in quantum computing are matrices that you do calculus with, at least in theory. You know, in practice, they're blobs of semiconductor or atoms hovering around in space. But I don't have to worry about any of that. I do theory only. Let's see. Is there anything else I would change? I want to say that I would have done more experiments, but when I was in second year, I blew up an oscilloscope, which is hard to do. So it's probably good that I didn't do more experiments.
Nice. Okay, so
Other than that, yeah, then I'm roughly happy. Maybe I would have fought harder to get a postdoc in Canada rather than going to Europe right away. But Europe did not turn out so bad. So probably.
nice.
And okay, like looking back in retrospect, you're always going to be able to find something that like, oh, I wish I did that instead. Why? Did it turn out better when you did that instead? No, you have no idea whether it was a better decision or not. So grass is always greener on the other side.
For sure. So we've got some questions raised. So let's start with Melody.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, and I can see you.
Okay, I was just wondering if you have any recommendations for online courses on quantum computing.
Oh, well, okay. If you go to edX, there's a TU Delft course, and some of the videos I am in. So of course I have to recommend that one. It's not bad, but as with most of these online courses, I think this is just a thing everyone's doing with online courses. The videos are super short, like 5-10 minutes at a time to promote engagement. I don't want to promote engagement. I don't want to have a lot of students. I want to, like, frankly, when I'm doing like teaching, research, I want to get rid of most of the students. Bottom 99%, I want to push them all out because they can't handle the tedium, the boredom. They need to be entertained. And they can go get that from TLC or Honey Boo Boo or whatever. They don't need to come to me. Well, okay. I don't have anything specific to say beyond that, but look for a course with some longer videos. Probably if there's an MIT open course where, and here's another key to look for, they are filming lectures that occur in a lecture hall, right? Where a professor is addressing students and you're getting the same thing that you would get at the university. That's a nice key to look for. Yeah, go look at mine too, though. It's a little quick hits, but they're semi-useful. Just don't treat it as like the entirety of everything you have to look for your education.
Thank you.
I just want to chime in. The MIT course, I think, is currently down. I actually just got an email that they're like moving it to another system or something, but they should have it up in a few weeks.
Okay, good tip. You're on mute, Sarah.
Sorry, I thought I wasn't the one that was next. So I did like a bit of research on you, and I had noticed that you spent like a lot of time, researching quantum computers and physics, right? Like, did you ever like come to a point where you were burning out, and did you ever come to a point where you kind of just didn't want to learn as like, well, not really didn't want to learn, but I guess just burning out with the things that you were learning, and how did you combat that?
Yo, all the time. Well, okay, and again, we're recording this. Like, why don't you just ask me about my love life while we're at it? Sort of private details that nobody is going to be on the internet forever. But yeah, I've burned out plenty of times. I've often been dissatisfied with the project that I'm doing. Actually, looking back on some of the projects that I was really proud of at the time, I occasionally ask myself, like, is this ever going to be used? What am I doing? And that comes and it goes. And I think with a large number of people on the planet, it's super easy to feel like you're completely insignificant and that you're like a little grain of dust on the wind being blown around by society and the forces of history. Yeah, which you are. Yeah, nothing I could say here will make you feel better. Oh, except that everybody is going through it. A lot of people burn out. You're allowed to burn out. It doesn't make you illegitimate. Fall off the horse, break your rib, suffer, deal with it, come back. Quit projects. Fail plenty of projects. And as long as you stay in, and as long as you learn some stuff, and as long as there's something they can get out of it, you will have a job. So that's the inspirational pep talk that I give you there.
All right, next is Virat Kumar.
Yeah. Hi, Ben. Thanks for your wonderful lecture session. Basically, I and one of my friend are learning quantum computing from the coding school, and we have participated, in various events, including Q-worlds. We are, quite experienced in, IT. We have about 18 years of experience in IT only, and we are handling complex projects. Now, we know there are, opportunities in quantum world, but we are not sure how to start with at this level of, at this period of our career, because we are handling big projects, but I'm not sure how we can enter in the quantum world where we can have such projects. So can you guide on us?
Well, let's see. I mean, I could tell you what to do. I might be wrong. My advice is not guaranteed to be good. Your mileage may vary. If I had a lot of coding experience, if I had a lot of software engineering experience, I would start looking at some of the big open source libraries that are out there. For example, Qtip, Qutip, which is the quantum toolbox in Python. A lot of people are using it as a tool in their research. And let's see, I've contributed to it in the past, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were aspects of the code base that would make a software engineer sort of laugh or make them disgusted. Again, because physicists and even computer scientists to some extent sort of allow software projects to grow organically and morph however they want, rather than imposing a sort of clean, orderly structure on them or planning. And let's see, this is true across the board. There's a joke about physicist code being like awful. So if you're accustomed to large software projects, if you know, for example, how to take a big code base and reduce the number of lines of code while achieving the same functionality, that's a valuable skill that nobody else has, right? And if you can exhibit that by making pull requests to the open source projects, like there's a huge list out there on GitHub somewhere of quantum open source software. Well, not quantum software like it runs on a quantum computer, but software that people use for quantum computing. If you can clean it up, if you can demonstrate value there, then probably you can get an entree into the field. There's another way that people have done it in the past. There's a guy named Pavel Pantaleev who designed a lot of the classical error correcting codes that that 5G uses to transmit information, and then found that there was a crossover that you could use from classical error correcting codes to quantum error correcting codes, and that some of those same 5G commercially used codes would have superior properties to the state of the art. So if you know a lot about classical error correction, you can sort of transfer your skills to quantum error correction as well. Although that's going to be harder because somebody else already did it. But yeah, those are the two things that
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
Neither one is guaranteed to succeed.
Right now,
Yeah. Thanks.
Tal. Yeah, go ahead, Tal.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Tal. Thanks for giving this talk. My question to you is, like quantum computing seems like it's becoming this like not a new field, but becoming more and more popular. Which industries do you think like stand to benefit the most, where we have problems that we cannot solve right now with classical computing, and that like there will be industries that really blossom from this change?
Yeah, okay, again, spicy, because a lot of people who are sort of pitching quantum computers are pitching them to industries that already exist. But, well, let's see, maybe they will be useful. Let me put that out there. So a lot of people are saying finance. A lot of people are talking about automotive. We're doing traffic planning, something like this. Yeah, maybe. I think that the industries where quantum computing will have the most benefit don't exist yet because of the lack of quantum computers, right? Peter Thiel talks about this. Huge billionaire, giant guy, right? You have to listen to him about making money. He obviously knows about a lot about it. And he's got this book called From Zero to One. You want to have the first thing of whatever it is, the first instance. So if there's something out there that you can't do because you don't have a quantum computer, the people who get the quantum computer are going to do that thing. They will go from 0 to 1, and then they'll benefit. So what do quantum computers help you do? Well, the list of quantum algorithms is growing every day. There is not a known complete set of things that a quantum computer will help you do, but we know that a quantum computer can help you to simulate quantum phenomena, right? Atoms and molecules coming together, maybe nuclei getting fused, maybe, who knows? Research on this is in its extreme infancy, so that's way too early to hype up. But yeah, if there are molecules that are too big and too complicated to analyze for classical computers, and a lot of stuff gets made out of molecules these days. They're everywhere. I don't know if you heard of molecules. But yeah, so it's sort of advanced chemistry, maybe nanotechnology, that's the kind of thing that I think you will be able to do with a quantum computer that you are more or less not able to do with conventional computers. But this is my personal opinion. Other people out there who have their own agendas could also be right. You might be able to use them to pick stocks or to plant cars. Also, I'm not much of an algorithms person, so I don't really know what the applications are. Most of my work is in error correction, and partly it's for this exact reason, that I don't understand a lot about the applications, but I know that if you're going to ask a question, you want the right answer and not a randomly determined answer that comes out of nowhere, right? So error correction is like the secure thing that I figured I would work on.
Sounds fair. Thank you for that.
Okay, so So there's a question in the chat from Judy. So she asked if you can discuss a bit on quantum machine learning.
Oh, can I discuss a little bit about quantum machine learning? Man, there's a lot of spicy food at this table. I am not a huge fan of machine learning at all, quantum or classical or what have you. Basically, I view it as taking a huge computer and throwing it at a problem rather than trying to understand the problem. They can do a lot of neat tricks, right? Like where they have the little Go playing algorithm that plays with itself, and then it can go beat a human player. Okay, cool. Can it drive a car? No. Do I have to fill out a bunch of internet captchas identifying a stop sign so that they can desperately try and get enough data to make it drive a car? Yeah. But let's see, quantum machine learning, yeah, probably is going to be a lot like classical machine learning in its application, right? You got a problem that you don't know how to solve another way, so you try and go get a sufficient solution by throwing lots of resources at the wall and seeing what sticks. Sometimes it works. Yeah, that's more or less my my thoughts on it.
Okay, so we still have some raised hands. I'm not sure if it's because, oh, we have Sumesh. Go ahead, Sumesh.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thanks for your talk, Ben. This has really been an interesting kind of overview of how to get into this field. And I guess my question is sort of similar to the gentleman earlier that talked about how he's coming from an IT background. I was wondering if you could go a little more in detail. In particular, I guess, well, I was thinking of how to phrase this. Basically, you know, if you work in like software development, for example, you're a computer programmer. You know, you might have a background in computer science, but you know what you're doing day to day may not be exactly computer science. It's related, and I know, and you know, I'm watching a lot of kind of intro level stuff about quantum computing. Like there's a pretty popular video on YouTube. I think Wired magazine put it out, where a quantum computing expert teaches quantum computing to people at different levels. And you know, one of them was like, you know, the grad student in computer science, and you know, he's like, well, how do I get into this field? And she's just like, oh, just try it, you know, just try it, just try out this you know, there's like you know, there's these open source toolkits, and you know, and like the real, you know, I feel like, you know, IBM and Google and all these companies are kind of using that language of a full stack developer to attract programmers to the field. And I'm just wondering, like, you know, the cursory look at some of the stuff I've done, you know, it looks like these toolkits are basically just a way to, you know, remotely use a quantum computer, and by sending an algorithm, and like, I'm just wondering, like, how feasible is it for a computer programmer with some background in computer science to actually make a dent in this field and like actually do something useful? You know, because it's one thing to, you know, follow the tutorial to make a hello world thing in this, you know, in Qiskit or something like that, but I don't know if it's actually like going to be something useful, you know, or how much it will take, how much actual background in the stuff you talked about today, how much, you know, knowledge in that, you know, grad student level stuff will I need to know to actually do something, you know. I don't know if this is like a really roundabout way of saying, I guess, like, you know, how can a programmers actually sort of get into the field and you know, I don't know, be worthwhile, I guess.
Well, let's see. Well, of course, okay. I should mention,
yeah,
at the company I'm with, Horizon Quantum Computing, we are always looking for people with a strong interest in quantum computing who are looking to get in, maybe want to do an internship, and have a lot of talent in terms of software engineering and coding, but who are maybe a little light on the physics. That would be sort of okay for us to have, although the more physics, the better. We're still willing to give people a shot, so apply for an internship, move to Singapore. Let's see. Is there any advice that I can give you that's more useful than that? The sort of public-facing, Qiskit and things like that are nice for giving people a taste of quantum computing, but there is a gap between the stuff you can use Qiskit for and academic grade research. Let's call it that. Although there's a few times that people have used Qiskit as a component in their publications and say, we've got this new quantum circuit, we think it has such and such a properties, and by the way, there's an actual device you can run the circuit on. The real physics does what we think it does, which is a nice. It's a section you would put at the end of your paper, right? By the way, there's a device. This is legit. We did it. Most of the math behind results like that is sort of settled. Skepticism about that kind of thing is rare, right? So if you say, I put these 3 unitary operations in a row, I think it's going to result in these measurement results. Nobody would say, oh, did you test it on a real device? But you can, if they did, you could just say, Qiskit, I did it. And that's nice. But to get, let's see, to make a big hit in quantum computing, if you want to make a big splash, a big dent, I suspect you've got to either come up with a very broad advancement in algorithms. Like, for example, research into quantum data structures is, the publications in this area are few and far between. You could probably master that field for the results that are in it today relatively quickly, and then see if you can make contributions there. Knowing a lot about classical data structures might help you, because very few physicists have an advanced education in data structures and algorithms. There's that big phone book by Corman, was it Lyserson, Rivest, and Stein, right? That mostly props up monitors in physics departments. You don't crack it open. I think I cracked it open one time, and I got a paper out of it because the thing I was doing was novel enough that people were interested. Even though it was sitting there in an undergrad textbook the entire time. Yeah, so you could focus on data structures. I don't know if you're going to get anything out of that. Just learn more, right? Just explore the gaps in your own knowledge, other people's knowledge, I would say try and be less satisfied, right? If someone tells you, oh, this is the way it is, this is what works, this is what we're doing, you can say, okay, yeah, and then go read up about why it is what they're doing. What's the history behind this? Could there be something better, right? And you can do that at the hardware level. You can do that at the software level. You can do that in terms of theoretical physics, and that's probably where the little nuggets are that you want to look for.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you so much for.
Of course, read dozens of books. Right?
Yeah.
Easy advice to give, hard to follow.
Right. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the questions, Nash. We have one more question from Rishik. He just wanted to ask about your thoughts on quantum cryptography and quantum computing's effects on computer security.
Let's see. I have a very small number of thoughts on quantum cryptography, or was that cryptanalysis? Well, okay. So the sort of story everybody tells about this is that there's Shor's algorithm, which you can use to break RSA. Let's see. It would be very tough to do on an existing quantum computer today, although in the future, right? Probably we will develop, unless something catastrophic happens, computers that can eventually break RSA. And once that happens, you're not going to be able to just increase the key length of the RSA and hope to keep up with the quantum computer, right? You would have to go for a ridiculously long key length in a very short period of time in order to try and stay above the size of the problem that the quantum computer can handle. So RSA, is not doomed now, But if you wanted to authenticate a message with RSA that you want to prove that you wrote in 25 years, maybe somebody could break that in 25 years. However, there is another quantum phenomenon. Well, okay, so you know how when you measure something, you disturb it, right? The Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You can apply that to making messages tamper evident, right? So that if you're distributing messages back and forth, and someone tries to read it, you can tell that they're trying to read it. You go, wow, okay, that's one thing, but I'd like to keep a secret, right? I don't want somebody reading my message at all. I don't care whether I can find out whether they read it. But there's something called a one-time pad, which is the solution for this, where you and the person you're trying to talk to just distribute random messages back and forth, between each other, and gradually you share a random message. Okay, that's step one. Then you take the message that you want to send, which is a bunch of ones and zeros, add on the random ones and zeros, and now the sum looks perfectly random. Anybody that was trying to read that, right, which you can now send over a classical channel, that doesn't have to be quantum anymore. Anybody that was trying to read it, if they took a 5-letter word, it would be, just as likely to be wiped as hello, right? Because any 5-letter random string could be equally, well attributed to what you were trying to write. So if you can distribute tamper evidently random numbers that you can prove are secret between you and a person you're trying to talk to, then you can communicate valuable messages secretly afterwards. That's called quantum key distribution. The key is the random integers that you're distributing first off. And yeah, okay. That is a much more robust cryptographic method than Shor's method. Not Shor's, RSA, because you're not relying on any assumptions about computational power. So quantum giveth and quantum taketh away on the cryptographic front. Economically, the situation is more complex, right? Are large institutions going to spend more money to develop quantum computers to break codes, or to develop quantum infrastructure to do QKD over an internet-like network? I don't know. That's a policy question, right? That's way outside of my expertise. But that's probably the question that you would want answered if you want to know what the fate of secure communication will be. How will it be affected by quantum mechanics?
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we have one question from Torian.
Okay, so currently, like I'm a 16-year-old student in high school that hasn't even learned physics yet, right? Now my question is, should I learn, like, should I go through like the physics pathway and then learn about the algorithm stuff, such as circ, and learn about the gates and everything, or should I hone my skills, with the gates and everything, and while simultaneously learning the basics of physics?
Well, let's see. There's a lot I want to say about this question. Of course, to some extent, you're asking a pig whether you should roll in mud. Right? I love physics. You should do more physics. Everybody should be doing more physics. Right? But if you took my advice, nobody would be farming, and then you have.
There are a lot of good people during the Trump group who were
let's see.
People in the trenches. People.
You are not about to learn physics in a high school physics class.
So where was it coming
let's get that up. What you are about to do is copy out a bunch of formulas. The teacher isn't really going to help you understand the origin behind them, or how they're derived, or the deeper process by which knowledge about things. If you wanted to annoy your teacher, you could try and get that knowledge out of them. Right. So for instance, okay, they're going to talk to you about the ideal gas flow problem. Right? PV equals nRT. And then they switch you through a bunch of exercises. Here's P, here's V, here's N, here's R. Calculate T. The real valuable exercise would be if you could derive the ideal gas flow and to know the principles, like the general sort of facts about a gas and the model that we use of the microscopic behavior of a gas that allows us to determine that P times V should be equal to N times R times T. And to understand the exceptions to that rule, when that microscopic model doesn't apply, and as a result, the phenomenon at the macroscopic level is different.
But the experts, as you know, say
So,
very
let's
close
see.
to that. And it's not.
There's a lot of things you should be doing in high school.
Now, Joe Biden.
One is to get good marks. Get a bunch of great marks, fill out the questions they give you. Make sure to do the exercise twice and to sort of mark your homework yourself so that you can see, check your own answers to see if they make sense.
And if you get higher than the goal, that's going to be great.
That's a valuable skill for later, and it's going to help you get into a good university.
Much better. We're going to try
Again, I
as
sound like you
much as
can.
we possibly can.
But,
if we do more than
there's a reason
that,
everybody
that's
says
great.
it.
But at least set a goal and say, this is where we want to be. And if we overshoot it, if we get more than that, that's terrific. So the idea, at least you have a goal. You're pushing for something. It's not just vague.
I'm sorry. I think it's me. Yeah. Sorry, my news is on. Yeah. Sorry.
You got inspirational stuff going on in the background.
I know. It's a Bernie Sanders stuff and Joe Biden stuff. No, Joe Biden's Bernie Sanders stuff. But yeah, I'll turn it off.
Yeah, okay. I'm excited for Bernie Sanders. I'm not as excited for Joe Biden. Are they recording this? Okay. Now, where were we? What you should be doing in high school? Yeah, of course, get good marks, get into a good university, expand your comfort zone, and, well, okay, there are skills that a 16-year-old can learn that are useful way later on, like LaTeX, Beamer, a little bit of programming, Python. 16-year-olds pick this kind of stuff up all the time. Go take a look, for example, at, this is going to make you like a real hit, Bob Martin. He's a guy that I've been following recently, and he's behind something called the Clean Coders, where you design the structure of a computer program to make sense at all times so that you could read it, understand it, and move on. Physicists like to write huge, long computer programs that look exactly like they did in the 1970s when we all decided to stop learning how to program. I am as guilty of this as anybody. I have a 3,000-line file sitting on my work computer that needs to be looked at. But let's see. So you can pick up programming. You could get started with Mathematica if you didn't have to pay for a license. There might be free alternatives that you can look at, like Haskell. That's another thing that will expand your brain. But yeah, let's see. Don't feel obligated when you're 16 to achieve great stuff at all times. Focus on getting a deeper understanding of whatever it is that they're putting in front of you. Right? Like if it's PV and RT, or if it's something, rolling down an inclined plane, try and figure out why the model predicts the phenomenon,
The federal government helps the states do as much as they can. Go to the states, find out what the problem is. Hear from them in the trenches.
Those are the skills that you can build now that will pay dividends later.
You would be saying things sometimes in the situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that I wanted to ask, I get that, like I always should be like learning like, the underlying basics of stuff and like I actually get like a better understanding of it, right? My question was like, should I get like a head start with like the gate stuff, like, learning about like, the different gates, like such as like, the C knot or, the gates that like, I know like very like little things about like, the quantum gates, but, like, should I like get like a basic understanding of that kind of thing?
Well, let's see.
Instead of like the regular physics.
Definitely not instead of. If you're going to go learn a lot about the gate model, you would want to understand it in addition to the physics. Let's see. There is one thing to sort of get about the gate model. So, and about CNOTs in particular. You know about the Hadamard gate?
Yeah, I do.
People can schedule their
You know what happens when you take a CNOT, right, that's on 2 qubits, right? So it's going down like this. And you put a Hadamard here, 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 and here, right? So you surround the CNOT by Hadamars.
Now, that goes to
No, I learned about this last week. So like, it's still a little, it's a little not really solidified. So yeah.
So this is, well, I'll spoil it for you. I'm going to remove the enjoyment of discovery from your life because you had the gall to ask me this question, man. The CNOT flips direction, right? So if you're doing a controlled knot, right? So you measure, well, you don't measure. You see whether this qubit is 1, and then you do an X on this qubit. If you put Hadamars on either side, then the total unitary gate looks exactly the same as if you were seeing whether this qubit was 1 and then doing an X on this qubit. And that is qualitatively different than what happens with classical logic. So that should be the little mind blower, right? Because you can't say, if A then B, oh, but I changed the calculation of A a bit, and I changed the calculation of B a bit, and now it's if B then A, right? Classical conditional logic is sort of unidirectional, right? The arrows all move in one direction. But in quantum mechanics, you can make them turn backwards. And that's one of the things that, or that's kind of the type of thing that if you were going to learn about the gate model at, while you were in high school, it's those kind of counterintuitive consequences that I would be focusing on if I were you, because it doesn't require a lot of mathematical background in order to get them, but they are still valuable in terms of figuring out what to do, even when you're in the advanced stages of a research project or career later on. But yeah, go prove that the C-naught turns backwards when you're surrounded with Hadamard gates.
Nice. Thank you for all the questions. Does anyone else have any more questions before we head off? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ben, for taking the time to present and answer all the questions. It was a really insightful talk. I learned a lot, and it was really good. I loved all the what you called miscellaneous information, but I thought it was very, very relevant to learning anything, and even quantum computing as well. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you everyone for attending and staying engaged and asking all these questions. You guys honestly made the whole workshop so much better with all your amazing questions. So we have, okay. So we have one more workshop coming up next week, same time. If you guys are open to join, it's by another quantum computing guy named Thomas O'Demiri. He works in Singapore, and he is, I guess, friends with Ben as well. So as I've heard, so you guys, I will upload the event onto Eventbrite. You can find it there as well. So if you guys would love to come, join in as well and ask as much questions as you can. All right, so I'll end the meeting now, but thank you guys for coming. It was amazing. This workshop was great. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.